And he's joining with the audio and he's connected. Yay, we've got 3 people. Wow, 4 people. Awesome. People are connecting. The party is starting. Good evening, boys and girls. So Q&A for the evening, which means we get to ask each other questions and we get to contribute and share a wealth of knowledge. Hopefully people will ask questions. Typing and chatting is allowed. I'm going to open the chat box here and I'm going to try to keep up. So I have nothing to say because I talked the whole this week. So if you guys have questions, please ask me. I'm going to take my glasses off because I'm getting this weird glare and I have this 11 demon eyes following. Question.
Nick, Andre, yeah. Just you had this lovely, interesting slide yesterday.
Last night you mentioned that you shouldn't eat predators. Crocodile is weird. Yeah, you shouldn't eat in large amounts. I wouldn't advocate eating crocodiles regularly, but crocodiles, farm crocodiles, simply because of what they're eating, tend to be healthier. They're not eating multiple trophic layers. They're eating cattle that's come out of a lot of the time they're eating cattle that's come straight out of a farm and fed to them. So the amount of crap that you're eating is quite minimal, to be honest. But don't eat wild crocodiles, especially the tail. There's a big incident occurring in the Kruger National at the moment with all the sewage running off from the villages outside the Kruger into the Limpopo River and these other areas. And the crocodiles there are actually, they store all that excess excess toxins in their tails so they can process them later with their liver. The problem is it just doesn't stop coming. So there have actually been incidences of crocodiles' tails rotting off in certain rivers in the Kruger National. I haven't heard it in other parks, probably does occur in other parks, but simply the size of the Kruger National and some of the large rivers coming through there are just choked up with feces and god-awful stuff. So yeah, don't eat wild crocodile, ever. Maybe 200 years ago you could probably get away with it, but the crocodiles we eat are all factory farmed, not factory farmed. But yeah, any other questions?
Hi, Nick, Andre, yeah, you made reference yesterday to that slide.
No questions. You guys remember you're allowed to use your microphone to ask a question if you want as well. You don't just have to type. So I'm actually going to put my glasses on because I can't read, which gives me demon eyes. Oh, blue eyes, pretty cool. Anything?
I'm trying to talk.
I'm going to put Andre Gildenace. I don't see.
Can you hear me, Nick?
Put your microphone on. Your microphone should be on, so you should be able to talk.
Yes, it's on. Can you hear me now?
Just put your microphone. If it doesn't work, just type the message. If anyone else has a message in the meantime, go ahead. Okay. I don't know why your microphone's not talking. This is the quietest Q&A we've had in ages. Now I feel awkward. Okay, was referencing your slide. Okay. Anton's hiding is the one about it was just oh, you're talking about the actual build up, the biomagnification. That was just an average figure. I don't have the actual figures on how to work with what toxins. That was just a thumb suck. I'm just using it as an example. You'd have to speak to a toxicologist to explain the exact ratios, but it does compound with every level and it's exponential with every level. So it gets larger and larger and larger, substantially larger. So you can imagine the amount of, if you say, for instance, if you were a cow, and let's just say each blade of grass had 1 microgram of cyanide. We use the word cyanide because everyone knows it's toxic. 1 microgram of cyanide in it. And if you think about the amount of grass that cows are eating in the course of a year, so let's just say that over the course of a year, that cow eats eats so much, and again, so having 1 gram of cyanide per every kilogram. And then you think about the amount of meat that a hyena or a secondary predator would kill, how much meat it would consume, and how many cows or how many buffalo or how many whatever it would consume over the course of a year, and that would compound. And then you think about how much meat, how much toxin would be in that hyena after eating all those individual animals. And then of course a lion comes along and eats that hyena, and then you want to come along and eat that lion. So it's compounded exponentially with every level. So you're dealing with like, I'm just using thumb suck figures, but 30, 40 grams as opposed to like 0.1 micrograms. So being a vegetarian is definitely healthier. But if you're going to eat meat, eat herbivores, don't eat carnivores. It's just that simple, because down the biomagnification pyramid, just like a trophic pyramid, it's much lower at a lower level. And same with fish. If you're going to eat fish, eat herbivorous fish, don't eat carnivorous fish. Mercury buildup in carnivorous fish is huge. Mercury buildup in herbivorous fish, comparably low. What about bushmeat in South Africa being consumed traditionally? Yes, it's definitely, bushmeat has significantly increased. Poaching is through the roof at the moment because the reserves are quiet, super quiet, and reserves are cutting costs on staff, and they're letting go of anti-poaching teams, cancelling contracts because they just can't afford it. So it's through the roof at the moment. So the best thing that you can do if you're going to buy meat, buy venison. Venison is far healthier for you than commercial meat, than commercial cattle. And also, if you're doing that, you're funding nature reserves. You're not funding cattle farms, you're funding nature reserves. So go to Checkers, go to Spar, go to Pick n Pay and buy venison. As much as you can, everything, venison balls, venison steaks. I only buy venison. I don't buy anything else. And that, because then you know that money is directly or indirectly going into conservation, as opposed to cattle farming is just going to cattle farms. So mercury is also to do the pollution, but again, with that, if you think about it, mercury is in the water, it's in the food that fish eat, it's in the phytoplankton, the zooplankton, the phytoplankton, small fish eat zooplankton, big fish eat the small fish. So on every level, initially you're getting a greater and greater concentration with the mercury. So again, the same thing. So the lower level, the lower you go down that biomagnification pyramid, the healthier it is. You're never not going to have toxins in your food. It's the higher up at the top, it's going to be more toxic. And that's a well-studied occurrence. And they have problems with eating wolves in parts of the world. It's the big problem with eating cats and dogs. It's the big problem with eating snakes. It's the big problem with eating any predatorial animal. Biomagnification of toxins. Ostriches is good, but if you're going to buy ostrich, get wild shot ostriches, but that usually doesn't occur anymore. Almost all ostriches are farmed. So buy Blesbok, buy kudu, buy Nyala. That's because they don't farm them in the conventional sense. They don't have little cages. You know, it's nature reserves. And the guy goes out, when Pete goes out and blasts 5 impala in the afternoon and throws them on the bucky and takes them back to the abattoir. And that's what you're buying. And it's just better because you know that reserve has been kept alive because those animals are going into feeding people. So, and either we buy the meat or the animal is that the reserves get poached out. And that's just the brass facts of it. Karoo lamb, so lamb are not natural animals. And actually I'm doing a presentation at the end of mammals. I was considering doing a presentation on the biomes, and we're going to compare the impact of Karoo lamb versus Karoo springbok and Karoo black wildebeest. And there's a study that was done by UCT, I think in 1998. So it's a bit old, but even by those numbers, they showed that if we had to switch sheep farming to wildebeest and springbok farming in the Karoo, the meat yield would increase by a minimum of 60%, and we would do substantially less environmental damage. So farmers would make more meat and they would do less damage to their land. But getting people out of that mindset of buying sheep and buying springboks is really challenging. Most people say, oh, Shane, you can't eat the springbok. So it's really, really challenging to change that view. But eating springbok is far healthier for the environment than eating sheep. Sheep wreck the Karoo. We're going to be doing a presentation and I'll show you some slides, literally a nature reserve and a sheep farm next together. And you'd think it's Photoshopped, the difference. I mean, the fence line looks like 2 different countries. So yeah, I don't buy sheep either. I love mutton. I mean, I eat curry all the time. But when I make my own curry, it's venison. Springbok is just as good as mutton if you make it in a curry. You can't tell the difference. But we're supposed to be talking about predators. So any questions about predators? Yes, about sandparks put a tender out to reduce various animals. Again, that's simply because the water shortage at the moment. A lot of we're going through a drought, and the parks can't handle those animals like warthogs. There's just too many of them. So culling a number, bring it down, at least keeps the whole integral population alive. You might have 6,000 instead of 10,000, but you've got 6,000 as opposed to 0. Because if you've got 10,000, the entire population collapses. There's not enough food for all of them, and they all starve. So we bring the numbers down in order to sustain a population. And hopefully that meat will become on the market or given into communities, and we can find some way to monetize it and bring money into conservation. But that's far more sustainable than trophy hunting, which blasts top the best animals. Culling excess population is a totally different thing. But your warthogs, they breed like flies. I mean, they're boom or bust animals, and we are going to do about warthogs, but warthogs can be 0 in one season and 1 million the next season. They explode. They do really, really well. Other questions? Yeah, rotating predators. See, this is a problem. Predators are like people. We get very good at a job, and they've shown that you could take something like a cheetah out of one area of the Kruger and you put him into another area of the Kruger, he pegs within a week. He just doesn't know what to do with himself. He starves. It's like taking a human, a Maori tracker from northern New Zealand, and you put him into the Karoo. He might be kick-ass out in the forests of New Zealand, but he wouldn't know what to do out here. He's an expert tracker, expert hunter, same as you take an Eskimo from the Chukchi Peninsula in Siberia. You get Eskimos there as well. If you put him out here, he'd be dead within a month. He wouldn't know what the hell to do, but he's a phenomenal hunter in his environment. And it's the same thing with predators. You can't just mix them around. They're very good at they're like people. They learn an area. They're not just eating plants. They learn the terrain. They learn the movement of the animals. They understand the weather. They learn the smells. They track with their nose. They don't track with their eyes. So you can't just take a predator and rotate it. It doesn't really work that easily. They try it, and it's usually quite a failure. Lions are flexible. Cheetahs and leopards are not flexible. They're good at what they do. If you take a cap leopard and you put him in a towel, he'll be dead within a week. Introducing leopards, absolutely. But the problem with baboons, the baboons in the Cape are basically completely extirpated. Their numbers are dropping by 50% every year. Within 3 years, I don't think there'll be any baboons around the peninsula. They've been obliterated. I do tours every single year in the Cape. And the last 4 years, I've been doing with baboon talks and work with Baboon Matters. Just with my students, bringing them through and getting to meet the ladies there. And we just look at the numbers every year, and it's not even sliding, it's plummeting. It's like a cliff drop. I mean, the numbers every single year, it is a catastrophic loss of population. We don't need to do any controlling of the baboons in the Cape. Anyone that says otherwise is just anti-baboon. They're not actually in conservation. I would not suggest any reserve to a baboon cull down the Cape. The numbers there cannot handle a cull. It's a human conflict management issue. It's not a population issue. The baboons in the Cape are underpopulated. A lot of the plant species that are reliant on baboons are going extinct because there are not enough baboons to pollinate those plants. Devin, they're reducing the Cape 100% because of human conflict. Farmers out there shoot them. The wine farmers shoot them because they come and eat the grapes. People shoot them because they come into their garden and they raid their properties. They dig at the cans. They get to the kitchen. They get hit by cars intentionally. You would not believe the number of people that intentionally hit baboons because they hate them. So the numbers are plummeting every year. And again, dogs, big dogs, they hammer baboons. They really do. Babies get left behind when they're fleeing from an area, and the dogs grab the babies. And there's this persistent mindset that they're overpopulated. The baboons are being pushed out of their natural habitat by farmers. And I understand we have to farm to survive, so I'm not going to criticize that. But the baboons are coming into suburban areas to try and survive, much like monkeys do on the East Coast. And we then blame them, saying, hey, you're in our area. But actually, they're just really just trying to survive. And it gets more and more difficult every year because every year there's less habitat. So they don't need to be culled. We need to create reserves for them, and we need to discourage them peacefully by locking our homes and making garbage tamper-proof and so on and so forth, and not leaving food in our garbage. You should compost all your food. Fires also affect the habitat, yes, and unnatural burnings have been a problem, but also a lack of fires have been a problem because a lot of the time those fires actually expose food for the baboons, and in areas that are close to human habitation, they don't want to burn anymore. So you get this thick woody growth, you get basically moribund fynbos, and this is weird, this is evolved with baboons and not predators. And you get this thick, overdense fynbos, and nothing can really forage in there. Where the fynbos shouldn't come up really higher than your chest as a human being. And some of that fynbos thickets are well over your head, depending on the species. And they just, it gets very dry and woody, and eventually, of course, the species, they die because they've got a limited lifespan. Being pyrophytes, they need fire to pollinate, to spread. Not to pollinate, but to spread. And now we haven't had fires in some of these areas for 50 years because we don't want to set fire to people's holiday homes. And of course, now that whole area, which was originally ideal foraging habitat for baboons, is just woody, overgrown, a shithole. And that's basically what it is. It's completely uninhabitable for baboons, so they come into our areas. So some areas have been overburned and some areas have not been burnt, and we are just stuffing things up. Natural predators of monkeys, eagles, leopards to a far lesser degree than you think. Cape Leopard Trust did a study on baboons. We did a talk with them and a bit of workshop with them last year, my university students, and we saw that only between 2 to 8%, depending on the individual, 2 to 8% of their diet was made up of baboons. So it's not a heavy impact. The Cape Leopards are tiny. They're like the size of a caracal. They don't hit baboon populations. Eagles are a big impactor of vervet monkeys, though. They're probably the primary predator. Marshall and crowned eagle being number one. He's a monkey specialist. If you go to a crowned eagle nest, you'll always find monkey bones underneath it. They handle them perfectly. Caracals are a big impact, but because caracals have been shot at by the farmers, it will take 100 years for those populations to recover, because there are whole areas that have been extirpated, completely annihilated. Caracals were a major controller of baby baboons and monkeys as well. And they're just gone. And people used to shoot eagles for sport because they used to find it fun to shoot something on the wing. And eagles have been annihilated as well. So we have noticing that predator numbers are increasing in certain areas, but they're not increasing enough. And we need to have this attitude to embrace predators rather than fear them. I mean, protect what you've got. Make sure your kid doesn't go running around in the bush on his own, but stop being afraid of predators. They're probably not going to hit you unless it's a lion and you happen to be sleeping out in the bush. With the amount of seals, sharks have been annihilated by people. People hate sharks. Even Steven Spielberg publicly has admitted that he felt embarrassed for making Jaws because of the damage it did to shark conservation. He regrets watching that movie. You can see the comments he makes about it on YouTube. He says he wished he hadn't made the movie because of the impact it made on shark conservation. Great white sharks, as I said, are about 1 or 2% of what they were 100 years ago. So you think about that impact. Whereas before, if you were having 100 seals being eaten a week, now you're only having 1 or 2 seals being eaten a week, and you can see why the population is exploding. Our nature guys, okay. There is overpopulation of lions is kind of challenging to say whether it's true or not. Lions, being predators, control themselves. If they kill too much prey, they starve, and then the numbers self-correct. It's a negative feedback. Prey is a little more difficult because they're reliant on food, and food takes longer to recover. Vegetation, once it's damaged, it's gone for a very long time. Whereas animals bounce back quite quickly given enough time because they're mobile. They migrate into areas. Plants can't migrate. An animal can be fully grown within a year. A tree can only be fully grown within 20 years, even though it's much bigger. So you can have an antelope that's ready to breed within a year, whereas a sexually mature tree can be 20 years. So areas that have been annihilated of their vegetation are done. That's why overpopulation of elephants is a concern, but overpopulations of lions is not as great a concern. Because if the lions starve to death, that's obviously bad, but in terms of an emotional view. But then they starve to death, and then which means that the prey items will recover for the next 4 or 5 years because there's not that many lions. But as prey items recover, the lions will grow in number too because there's lots of prey to eat. And you get this negative feedback where things just balance. Why are there crocodiles and hippos east flowing rivers and west flowing rivers? It could also just be with the temperature. It could be to do with climate, a lot of the topography. I'm not going to say that's 100% true. I've seen crocodiles in western flowing rivers plenty of times. And I've seen hippos in East Africa and western flowing rivers. I've got a picture of hippos and pods in rivers flowing in 2 different directions and different sides of the park. So that's not true, but it could be just due to topography in that particular area. Maybe one area gets more sun at certain times of the day. I don't know every part of the Kruger National, so I can't comment. My uncle domesticated a caracal. Tragic story about that. I know another guy domesticated a caracal, and it came home and it killed 3 of his boerboels, and he obviously felt bad about it. He didn't want to put the cat down, so he gave it to a rehab center up in Popo, and that was 15 years ago. So I think it's passed on from the world now. But caracals, they might be tame to us, but they still have that killer instinct, and they'll take down a pit bull like a boerboel like it's a plaything. We have mongooses to take out a chicken sometimes. Why do they? It's often a nutrient issue sometimes because mongooses, they don't pluck their prey. They're quite primitive in that respect. They don't clean their prey like a cat. So for them to get to the meatier parts might be challenging, whereas a skull is quite easy to just crunch through, get to the nutrients of the brain, and off they go. But them to actually, remember, they're nipping, biting, piercing teeth. So a big piece of meat would be hard for them to rip apart like a lion. So there's very few feathers around the head, so they'd munch through that, crack open the skull, get the brain, and all the jaw muscles, which are quite soft by comparison, but all those thick pieces of breast, they're not going to be able to work with it. They've got little needle teeth. It's the same with house cats. They typically don't go for ribs and stuff like that. They can't get their teeth into those little bits. The elephant overpopulation, we're going to do elephants again. We're doing this whole workshops on mammals before we do anything else. Contentious whether elephants are overpopulated or not overpopulated. We'll do that in elephants, and everyone's got their own opinions. I've got my opinions, and people will tell me that I'm talking bullshit, and I'll tell them that they're talking bullshit. So, and you'll tell me I'm talking bullshit, and I'll say you don't know what you're talking about, and vice versa. So we will talk about that in the elephants. Anything else? Questions? Oh, and regarding western flowing rivers in Sri Lanka, plenty of western flowing rivers on the western side of the country and inundated with crocodiles. I mean, just chock-a-block. And they've got two species of crocodiles, the mugger and the saltwater crocodile. So again, I don't think it's true. And hippos used to range all the way up to England and right through to India historically. So I'm pretty sure that we would have found hippos in those areas as well, in western flowing rivers. Questions? No questions? Very quiet. No, our mountain lion, we're actually doing this. I don't want to spoil it for you because we're doing caracals next week and we're doing mountain lions and cheetahs next week, but I'm going to spoil it for you and you're going to hear it anyway. The closest relative of the American mountain lion is actually the cheetah. I'm leaving it at that, and I'll explain to you next week in Caniforms. So, but they're not related to the pantherans. They're closely related to the asionics. They're cats, but that's all we're talking about now. I don't want to ruin Caniforms because then you won't pitch it to my class. Okay. But yeah, cool. Anything else? Questions? I like the question about the mountain lion. It's a good question. Quiet. Super quiet. I'm going to see if I can put on. Is there any way to put on family tree? Okay, well, I'm going to upload something. You can do your own research. I'll send you a family tree of all the animals. We're going to do. I'll email some links to everybody as well, just some really good places. And again, bear in mind that with new research, family trees do change. They discover things, and said for a long time they linked hippos and pigs together, but for the last 15, 20 years, that's been scrapped. But I'll send you guys actually a nice picture out on the Tree of Life, a far more comprehensive one, specifically with mammals, because I think we are, being mammals, it's more relevant and pertinent to us. So we'll look at that later. What is this question, Willem? The threat to lions in Africa from extinction? Okay, so I'll answer the question about feral cats in a second. It was amazing we're talking about cats. That's supposed to be for next week. Threat to lions, I think you're saying. Yeah, it's threat to lions in Africa. Lion populations in 1970, the wild population of lions in 1970 was 200,000. They estimate today that there's 7,000 wild lions left. So that's 50 years later, we've gone from 200,000 to 7,000 wild lions. That's the official WHO, not WHO, WWF numbers. But again, WWF, I have other views of them, but that's their numbers. And this is the big problem with they say it's a sustainable system for trophy hunting. It's not. We're looking at the numbers. I mean, they're not even 10% of what they were 100 years ago. I mean, 50 years ago. Feral cats are just domestic cats that have gone feral, just like the dingo is a domestic dog. It's just Felis sylvesticus familiaris, which is the scientific name. It's descended from the African wildcat. We're going to be doing that next session. and they're just feral. That's it. You can take them. There's no difference. They're just domestic cats that were never raised in a human home. No difference. That is something we're going to talk about with cats next week. Can we say the same with coyotes? Now, coyotes are a separate breed of caniform, of canine. They're like a wolf, or the jackals. Jackals, coyotes, wolves, they're all canis. They are species. They are able to interbreed with dogs because they all have 7 chromosomes, but they are a full-blown recognized species. They have nothing feral, domestic about them. There's no human influence in them. They are a solitary. They're basically like a big jackal. If you want to think about they live in monogamous pairs, and they hunt solitarily or in pairs. They don't really operate in groups usually. So coyotes are not feral dogs. They are just very solitary wolves, if you want to think of them that way. But they are as different species. How otters are the same as dogs? So remember, they're not the same as dogs. They belong to the same group of families, the Caniforms. These are all animals that have a common ancestor. So you go back 50 million years ago, or actually more than 50 million years ago, they all had one family. Their families branched out to many members. So, and again, it's the hunting technique. They base more their skull structure and obviously their genetics. The genetic tests prove everything. Like you can say, my brother and I, we're related because we have a genetic test that proves it. So the question with seals being related with otters are muscelids. Muscelids are badgers, ferrets, weasels, and all those guys, and otters. And muscelids are part of the caniform superfamily or suborder, same thing. And so they're bears, wolves, and these are all the ones we did in this week. Were all the caniforms. They're all related historically. They have common ancestry. And if you look at the skull, I mean, the skull alone is indicative of how similarly related they are. The wolves, or the canines, as the modern canines, are actually the youngest group. They've only been around for about 2 million years. All the other families are really old. Bears have been around for 50 million years. Seals, 50 million years. You know, the canines have shot off from the ancient canines very recently, and but the caniforms were mostly as robust, quite strong-jawed specialist mammals, where the feliforms were quite different. Feliforms are very old, by contrast. Seals species in English with tourists, yeah, fock, and Acacia for oteries, yes. Sorry, we do not use the word seal. I was told seal folk in Northern Hemisphere and sea lions are small ear flaps, yes. Yeah, so seals, true seals, as in folk, that's a word I said, you know, when you get bit, you say, oh, folk it, because the scientific word is a folk it. It's they don't have external ears. Fur seals have external ears and actually have an external penis. You can see that little sheath flap when they're lying on their belly like a lion. Whereas with the true seal, it's completely inside. You just can't see anything. All the nipples is completely inside, like they're built like a fish. Very streamlined. So, and again, you don't get many fur seals in the Northern Hemisphere. There are 1 or 2 species in the Bering Ocean. There's a species. There was one in Japan. It's now extinct, as in the 1970s. But the fur seals are limited to the Southern Hemisphere. The normal seals have got pretty much everywhere. Yeah, so their fin sea lions can, okay. So yeah, I hope that, Florence, I hope that answers that question. So it's, the true seals have got a great distribution. They like the colder climates though, being more blubbery. They don't have much fur, so they don't like to be in the warmer areas. They wouldn't survive in the Cape. It's just, they wouldn't live long in the Cape. They'd like the winters and they'd want to go back in the summers. But the fur seals can handle more tropical areas. That's why you had them in Hawaii, you have them in California, you have them in the Cape, you have them in Japan. But they typically stick more in the Southern Hemisphere. And if they are going to the Northern Hemisphere, they are kind of on the southern side of the Northern Hemisphere. They're not getting far north. Why is the government issuing permits hunting predators? Money talks. It's as simple as that. If I give you 500,000 Rand and I say you can keep 100,000 Rand, I want to shoot a lion, most guys will look the other way. It's just that simple. Money talks. That's it. If I say to you, I'll give you 20 million Rand, if you let me, I'm paying 20 million Rand for that elephant, but you can keep 2 million on the side, the guy will say, cool, hunt that elephant. It's just that simple. Money talks. There's no other justifiable reason for it. Send mail presentations. Yes, but I do have all the presentations on YouTube, which not that I'm worried about copyright infringement. I don't believe in that shit. But yeah, I mean, if you want to watch me just talking, a lot of the stuff in the presentation that I talk about is not physically written. Like, it's stuff that I'm just drawing off the top of my head as I'm talking. I don't have the time to literally write every word I say. It's just coming when I remember it. That's why I prefer doing more than one class, because sometimes I remember one thing in one class that I don't do in another class. So yeah, and the link, you can just go to YouTube, Nick Bredenkamp. I'll put it here. I've sent everyone a link to my YouTube, Nick Bredenkamp. And that's where you can just YouTube Nick Bredenkamp, and you can subscribe to my page, and you can rewatch the videos as many times as you want. Happy to send you the PPTs. They are big. They're like 100 megabytes each, but 50% of the information isn't in the actual PPT. It's me talking. It was spoken at the end of the diving about seals. I've heard people say they're very sociable. No, I don't have an issue. My view with animals is if you're not impacting, it's fine. We're human, we're animals. If you don't impact on the animal's lifestyle, I don't see an issue with it. The problem is, of course, when to know when you are and aren't impacting. So seals, like I took Chinese students 2 years ago to Cape Town, to Maisenberg Beach, and we were teaching them surfing. I don't surf, but we had another guy who surfs. And we had this female seal just kind of literally swimming around the kids' surfboards. And she just came up out of curiosity, and she was swimming around the surfboards. And the kids were enraptured. These are 12-year-old Chinese kids. They'd never seen a wild seal in their life. And the seal was just hanging out. And, fuck it. If the seal wants to swim with the kids, let them swim with the kids. So I don't care. You don't have to chase a seal away. He's just curious. And it's a wild seal. So it was a female. It wasn't a male. So I don't mind interaction if it's totally of the animal's prerogative and the animal's allowed to leave. I don't like caged interaction, like let's go pet the penguin or let's go pet the cheetah. If the cheetah comes out to you out of the wild and wants a scratch, I mean, it's not going to happen. But if it happens, cool, give it a scratch. It's not going to happen. I know elephants that like that. Tula's got some amazingly friendly elephants, and they come right up to me. I've got a lot of pictures on Facebook when I was working there of Gobisa giving me a scratch on my face and wiping a snot on my face, and me giving a scratch on the trunk. And he's a completely wild elephant. There's no bribery or whatever. In Sri Lanka, I had Gamanu, which was an Asian elephant, and he'd come right up to the vehicle, and he would beg, and he wouldn't go away until you gave him an orange. He wasn't aggressive. He would just sit there, and he would follow the vehicle until you gave him an orange. Then he walk off, because he just learned that's what you did. And he would follow you all the way back to the lodge if you didn't give him an orange. So we give him one orange and off we go. Place for big cat sanctuaries, contentious view. Good for education, but not conservation. That's my view. But again, conservation and education overlap. So big cat sanctuaries, if it's ethical, and you're not drugging the animals, and you're not saying, they're pat the sedated cheetah. If it's assisting research, and it's assisting education, and it's enlightening people, sure. But I mean, there's a lot of unethical cat places where they let you, I mean, the cat is stoned, I mean, completely stoned. So it's an individual case. Every case needs to be looked at individually. There's no blanket statement. I heard a marine biologist say that sharks and weasels, they take back. Yes, well, they don't, remember, sharks are, I mean, being a predator is tough. And if you don't have to hunt, you don't have to hunt. They're not going to kill every seal they see. If they're full, they're full. And people would free dive with great whites. They just make sure the great white ate the day before. If you know that a great white ate, you can swim with him. He's not going to attack you. He doesn't give a crap. It's only when they're hungry, that's when they accidentally bite people. Remember that we're not a natural prey item for sharks. But if this great white's been binge eating on food and he's full, he's probably not going to attack you. It's not guaranteed. But there's lots of videos of guys free diving with great whites and they have no issues. Lions and eating hyenas, yes. If you remotely, weakness is everything in survival. If you even show a sign of weakness, you're done. And there've been many cases where leopards have been killed by other leopards and eaten. Cannibalism occurs with a regular level amongst predators. There's no such thing as, oh, well, I don't eat the same kind. If you're a lion, other lions are up for grabs. And if you're a cheetah, other cheetahs are up for grabs. It's occurred. Plenty of cases of leopards eating other leopards, actually hunting other leopards, not just getting a dead one. I mean, where you've seen one male stalk another male, kill him and eat him. It happens all the time. What about horse riding? See, horses have been selectively bred like dogs to have certain kinds of behavior. So horses that have been bred to have a predilection and a comfort towards riding, I don't see the issue, although it's not vegan. Anyone that says it's vegan is lying, because it's you are forcing an animal to do something, even if it might be comfortable with it. But we broke that. We bred that out of them over 20,000 years. We there's cases of humans being riding horses up to 8,000 years ago. So we've selectively bred them like dogs. I mean, you look at a Chihuahua coming from a wolf, we bred certain levels of behavior and tendencies into them. So they don't mind being ridden. But it's, of course, a totally different situation from a wild animal. If you bred elephants over 20 or 30,000 years to be comfortable with riding, I could argue, yeah, it's fine because the elephant doesn't care. Covering meerkats, yeah, meerkats are mongooses, and mongooses are Caniforms. So that's next week, Andre. Elephant ostrich riding. Yeah, so elephants can't be captively bred. There are very few cases of them successfully breeding in captivity. That's why historically they used to just catch them, and still to this day in Asia they catch them in the wild, and they break them, forcibly break them by starvation and beating them. And most cases of elephants are broken very aggressively. So yeah, I don't like elephants being ridden ever. I don't mind people born in relationships with elephants. I have a couple of elephants that I'm on good terms with, and that's because the elephant, it's entirely on the elephant's term. They're intelligent and they do what they want to do. Any other questions? We've got like 2 minutes left. Didn't do too much about predators, but it's always fun. Knowledge is knowledge. Nothing. Quiet, peaceful, calm energy, happy energy. One of the owners of Safari stopped doing walks because he sees 200. I think that's pure nonsense. It is statistically more dangerous to go walking in your average suburb in South Africa than go walking in the bush. I would feel more comfortable walking in the bush without a rifle than I would walking in the suburbs of Johannesburg. Even in freaking Rudaport, you're statistically more likely to get attacked. You know, you can go walk the Big Five, the Kruger National, any Big Five Park, and 999 times out of 1,000, you're going to be perfectly fine, as long as you're not an idiot. Don't go swimming in the water. Don't go walking through reeds, that sort of stuff. Don't go blindly walking into bushes. You'll be fine. So no, I think not walking in the bush is crap. Walk the bush, by all means. Get in touch with nature. You know, embrace the smell, learn to use your ears. I mean, I don't like doing drives. When I freelance as a guide, I hate driving. I absolutely loathe it. I'll do it under sufferance, but I like to be a trails guide. I'll walk with a rifle in South Africa, but in Sri Lanka and Kenya, I didn't use a rifle. I walked with a stick, and I got charged by an elephant once in Sri Lanka, and I shouted to wave a stick, and off he went. Pushed the guest behind a termite mound. It was fine. We do it in South Africa because of legalities, but no, we don't need to have rifles. I mean, it's fine, but I don't think it's this culture of you must be afraid of the bush. Just respect the bush. Big difference to being afraid. We've got 1 minute left. We're going to end on that note. We'll talk maybe more about walking in the bush another day. My own experiences and everyone else's experiences. I'm sure we've got some trails guides here that would agree or disagree. So yeah, on that note, guys, thank you for joining. I will upload, I'm going to actually upload all these Q&A sessions up at a later date, and we'll just discuss there and then. Yeah, we've got 1 minute left. So if any other questions, we've got 1 minute left. No more questions. So no more anything done. Cool. Okay, yeah, if there's no more questions, I'm going to hang on until the session ends because then maybe someone's typing something and it takes time to type. And on that note, guys, yeah, I'm really enjoying that teaching you guys. I hope you guys learned something. If there are any questions, any criticisms, any comments, don't be afraid to share. If you don't like the way I'm doing something, yeah, please tell me. If you want me to cover something, if you feel it's not technical enough or too technical, yeah, please email me and say, Nick, this is bullshit, or if you're talking nonsense, I want to hear it. Okay, cool, guys. I think we're done. Wednesday and Friday next week, and a Saturday Q&A. I think that's just best for me going forward. It seems my Mondays and Tuesdays are chaotic, and I don't get time to really sit down and do what I need to do. So thanks, guys. I love you all. I really appreciate you just listening to my nonsense. And see you then. Auf Wiedersehen, adios, arrivederci, zaijian, sayonara. Cheers.